you have questions about digital photography, you've come to the right place. Welcome to Photofocus. Here's your host, Scott Bourne.
Welcome to another edition of Photofocus. I am your host, Scott Bourne, and, well, this time I have a reason. Today's show is, again, hosted just by me, and I'm sorry about that, but had my buddy Matt Klaskowski all set to go. Matt from Kelby Media Group, Lightroom extraordinaire teacher, and, by the way, a new black belt. We were ready to go, and then his hard drive crashed. So that was that. So you're stuck with me today. I'll do the best I can to answer your questions. This is the original Q&A photography show brought to you by Adorama, more than a camera store. We appreciate their support of Photofocus. Today's first question comes from Gary Harris in Alaska. I know you've been to Homer, so it seems whenever I get pictures of the mountains across the bay, they look too blue. I use a polarizer filter and can always correct things later in Lightroom, but how do I get rid of so much blueness in the shot itself? The less I have to edit, the better. I have been adjusting white balance as well, but not sure. Well, Gary, it seems to me if the shots are too blue that you've not been properly adjusting the white balance. And one of the problems might be is the mountains are many miles away from your location. So what are you using to establish your custom white balance? If you're holding a white card 10 yards away from yourself and the mountains are miles away, the light on the mountains may not match where you're shooting. So you're probably facing a custom white balance issue. And the best thing I can tell you is to look at the necessary degrees Kelvin in a corrected image and manually set your camera to that amount of blue. In other words, set a color temperature that matches the degrees Kelvin that you get in post that you like, and that might be the way to solve the problem. But the reason that the mountains are so blue is that they're simply reflecting the sky, and the sky is blue, so the mountains being white are going to reflect that blue color. It is very easy to get rid of in post. It's a 2-second, that's right, 2-second correction. So I don't know. You'll probably spend more time trying to get the correct white balance than you would just fixing the blue mountains. It's your call. But in any event, I would look at where you end up in Lightroom or Photoshop or whatever you end up using in terms of what are the degrees Kelvin of the shot. Is it 3,000? Is it 5,000? Whatever it is that you like. And then manually set your camera for that. Almost all cameras will let you set the degrees Kelvin. At least the DSLRs will do that. And hopefully that will solve your problem. I would love to hear back from you, Gary, to find out if it does. Thanks for writing. Gary wrote to me at photofocus at MaryEdward.me.com, and you can too if you have a question about photography. Send it in. Can't answer all the questions we get because we do get thousands, but if you give me your name, your hometown, and make it short and sweet and pithy, you improve your odds of getting your question read on the air. Kim Chance sent a question to photofocus@me.com. Kim is from Brooklyn, New York. How do I get the most frames per second out of my camera? I'm trying to capture action and want the best chance I can get at making the shot. Alrighty then, Kim. Well, let's take a look at how you can do that. Each camera is a little bit different, but the first thing you can do, if action is the most important thing, is do something I only recommend doing in this case, is shoot JPEG. I usually shoot RAW almost all the time, but when I'm shooting motorsports, for instance, I typically shoot JPEG because I want the most frames per second. I want to have the biggest buffers I can get, so I switch to JPEG. That helps a lot. And some cameras give you the option for different sizes of JPEG. It depends on your output. If you're just outputting for the web, then make that a smaller JPEG and you'll get the most frames per second. Also, certain cameras use different kinds of autofocus. You want to make sure that you're using the kind of autofocus that's continuous autofocus, of course. And look at the sub-menu items on autofocus, because some cameras, for instance, will release on actuation, and some will release on focus, and some will release after focus. It gets very complicated. So experiment with your particular camera, and yes, read the manual, and find out. It'll be in there what you have to do to get the maximum frames per second. But going to JPEG is the simple answer to this question. That will help. That will speed up the camera. That will give you a bigger buffer. That will let you capture more frames. And also make sure you're using a UDMA capable card, compact flash or SD card. assuming you have a UDM capable camera, and almost all of the new cameras are UDMA. You want to use a fast card. That is a part of this equation. So there's a couple of things you can do, and I hope you find that helpful. Let's take another question. This is Renee from Gotha, Germany. Renee Grenkorn. Thank you very much for writing in, Renee. I love attending photo workshops and learn a lot from them. In November, I'll be attending my first portraiture workshop. What kind of advice would you and your guest, I don't have a guest, sorry today, give me to get the most out of this experience? Any thoughts, considerations beforehand? I'm not talking about gear, just thoughts and ideas from an artist's perspective. Okay, Renee, well, I think there is one thing about gear you're going to have to face. Most of the people that come to my workshops, their biggest problem is they do not know their gear. So if you really want to be geared up, pun intended, for this workshop, read your manual. Front to back, several times. Know how everything works, because the chances that the instructor knows your individual camera, not so good. There's so many different cameras out there. They each do things a little bit differently. So read your manual, become familiar with your camera. Do not buy a camera the day before a workshop, because then you're never going to be familiar with it in time. You need to be familiar with your camera. The other thing I think you need to do is don't be afraid to ask questions. I've led workshops before and then get a comment card back when the people who were on a 10-day workshop say, well, you never answered my question about such and such. I was hoping you were going to bring that up. Well, sorry, I failed the ESP in college. You got to bring up the question. You got to tell me that's what you want to know. So be sure that the instructors know what it is you expect. A good instructor wants to know what your expectations are, because they're there because they want to help you. Believe me, this is not a way to make a easy living. Being a photo workshop leader, everyone thinks it's a great way to make money. It's not. It's hard work for very little money, a lot of frustration, a lot of difficult people sometimes. So ask your questions. They want you to enjoy it. They want to make it a positive experience. Ask plenty of questions. And a couple of other things. Listen. When they say do something, do it. Don't decide you know better. You paid to go on the workshop because you think they've got something to teach you, so listen. Do what they say. Another thing you want to be sure to protect against is almost every workshop there's one student who thinks he knows more than the instructor. Don't let that student hijack your workshop experience. If he starts dominating the conversation, starts taking things off track, interrupt him. Say, hey, I paid to come here to listen to this guy, not you, so be quiet. You have to be assertive. So ask questions, listen, do what they tell you, know your camera gear. Don't let any trolls ruin the experience. And, allow yourself to have a little bit of fun, too, because portrait workshops in particular, you're going to be dealing with people. There's chances to meet new people, get to know them, have a lot of fun with it. That's my best advice. I really appreciate your question to Photofocus. Before we go on, I do want to say that this will be the last podcast I mention this on, because the deal is gone at the end of the month. But right now, if you buy 1 month of Animoto, Animoto.com, you get a free month of Animoto to go with it, and a copy of my brand new book from Random House called Going Pro, which is all about how to become a professional photographer, get your pictures published. It's co-written by Skip Cohen, and a bunch of famous photographers from all over the world chipped in and gave us images. Vincent Laforet, who did the groundbreaking film Reverie, did the forward for us. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning photographer, so not bad having his input. Anyway, you get a free book. That's like a $20 value. You get a free month of Animoto, and all you got to do is buy one. Now, there's a banner on the front page of the Photofocus.com site. Up until the end of October, you click on that, you get this deal. At the end of October, it goes away, so if you're hearing this show in November, sorry, you missed it. Maybe we'll have another deal, maybe we won't. But right now, you can get this deal. It's the best deal they've ever offered. Animoto, thank you for your support of Photofocus. Okay, we have a question here from Norway. Roar Engen wrote in and said, you've mentioned several times in the show that you should register images with the Library of Congress. I come from and live in Norway. I don't expect you to know our local laws. Good, because I do not. Do you need to register your photos, I think he means mine, in every country of the world, or registering the U.S. protect you worldwide? I can't give you any legal advice, Roar, I'm sorry, because they just won't let me do that without a current law license. But I can tell you how I approach things. The United States Copyright Act, as it's been explained to me, has been adopted by treaty in many countries around the world. So I only register my images in the United States, and that is enforceable in many other countries as a result thereof, particularly English-speaking countries or countries in North America. Where it's probably not helpful is China and old Soviet bloc countries, but you know what? Infringement runs rampant in these places, and there are virtually no enforcement mechanisms to do a thing about it, so I don't worry about it. I just do my registration in the United States. That covers me in most places that I care about being covered in. And for you, I'm not sure how this would work, because I don't know how foreign nationals are able to register images with the United States Library of Congress. It may be that registering images in your country, if it is signatory to Title 17 of the United States Code's Library of Congress, I can't speak today, Copyright Act, then it might be sufficient in where you live. But you would need to contact an attorney where you live to find out the answer. Sorry, I can't be more helpful. All right, this is a long question from Ken in Blacksburg, Virginia. My camera shoots a 3x2 image. We're talking format here. So I frame my shot for a 3x2 image when I take it. But I found as I print them that I rarely ever use 3x2 prints. 5x7, 8.5 by 11, 11 by 14, 13 by 19. These are all common paper sizes, and none of them are 3x2. Only the small 4x6 matches the rotation of my original image. So, in the end, I almost always am forced to crop the image to fit these paper sizes, and almost always have to lose a little something I liked in the original shot. So what's the solution? Do you shoot already knowing your eventual print size? Do you custom frame nearly every time? What about those people who say never crop? Seems impossible to me. Ken, first of all, let's work backwards. Ignore utterly, with every single molecule in your body, those people that say never crop. Because they're part of what I call the pixel peeper police. We don't care what they think. They're not going to buy your photos. It doesn't matter what they think of your photos. You're the artist. You take the pictures. So if you want to crop, crop. I crop every day. So whoever doesn't like it, tough. I crop. Deal with it. Cropping is fine. Cropping has been around since there's been photography. And by the way, we used to have to crop every single shot on a film camera to get an 8x10. It's not a big deal. That said, I don't ever worry about frame sizes. I shoot what I shoot. If I don't want to crop, I don't. And then I just have a custom frame built. But not really. I have a secret for you. It's expensive to have custom framing. We all know that. So there's a couple of ways around that. Number one, I tend to do a lot of work on canvas. Canvases typically don't need frames, and the size is the size. Custom canvases are less expensive than frames in general. So that's one way around it. A second way around it is to get a custom mat at the next size up in a standard frame, and this will save you buku money. So let's say you got a shot that's 11 by 13 instead of 11 by 14. Normally that would go, into a 16 by 20 maybe, or even a little bit larger frame. Just get a custom mat and use the 16 by 20 frame, and don't worry about it. It'll be fine. And leave a little bit extra on the bottom is the secret to that. And that way you don't have to worry about it. So you can crop if you want, or you can simply print to size. And I leave my images original because I work in aperture, and then I output them based on the size I need, and sometimes crop for each individual use. But for me, the frame is a piece of wood that goes around my picture. And people are buying the picture because they want the picture. The frame is just there to support it for me. So I'm not going to be beholden to the frame size. That's just my opinion. It's what you asked for, though. So I hope that helps you. By the way, I want to mention that before we go on, Photofocus.com is available for your enjoyment 7 days a week. We have news, reviews, and tips and advice, all related to photography. It's free. You don't have to sign up for anything. You can sign up for a free RSS feed, but you don't have to. You don't have to give any contact information. You don't have to sign up, give a credit card. It's always free, always will be as long as I run it, always has been. So if you want more stuff other than the podcast that we bring you on the 5th, the 15th, and the 25th of the month, visit Photofocus.com. Dan Finn from Cooksaki, New York. That is a new one on me. I use Time Machine to back up my entire system to an external drive. I also use Aperture's Vault to back up my Aperture libraries to a different external hard drive, and by doing so I have my photos saved in 2 places besides the main system. This seems to work for me, but I'm curious, is there a better way? With that in mind, my question to you is, what is your backup routine? What backup software do you use, and or recommend, and what kind of hardware setup do you have? Dan, I have talked about this, but it's been a while, so I'll tell you what we're using today, although I think it's going to change pretty quickly. Currently, my main drives are WeeBeeTechs, and I use the WeeBeeTech enclosures, which has 2 terabyte drives in them. And I have 4 2-terabyte drives that runs my main Aperture library, and my backup goes to another WeeBeeTech device that allows me to put my Aperture vaults there. Then I take those drives, which are removable, out and recycle them every day. So I'm bringing in 1 new drive every day, taking the other drive home. And what that does for me is that makes sure that I have the most current copy of my Aperture library backed up in a vault, and 1 at home and 1 at the office. So if there's a fire, likely wouldn't be both places, I'm going to have my entire photo library backed up and with me. Now, I am about to buy the new Promise drives that work with the new Macintosh interface, the very super fast Thunderbolt-based technology that gives you real quick throughput. And when I do that, I'll probably eliminate the WeeBeeTech as my Aperture library and make the Promise drives my new basic system. And we'll rely on Thunderbolt to transfer to the Promise drives. We'll rely on USB or FireWire to move that to the backup WeeBeeTech RAID drives, which I'll take home at night. Now, a lot of people use the cloud. I'm not a big believer in it. Number one, because I like to save high-res versions of my photos, and you can't really save hundreds of thousands of high-res photos in the cloud. But that is an option. The main thing to know, Dan, is whatever brand you use, make sure that you have at least 2 backups, 1 in a different location than your main library. It doesn't do any good to have 2 backups in the same room, because the same fire, the same burglary, the same flood ruins both copies. Have 1 at home, 1 at the office. Now, I also have an old tape drive backup system that I've had forever that I bought for another project, and I back up online to that at night via the internet. But it's not going to the cloud, it's going to a tape drive. So that gives me, in a whole other state, a copy of my library. And I have 400 and, I don't know, I think I've got about 490,000 images today. Broken into 5 Aperture libraries. I try to keep them under 100,000 to keep them manageable, and I hope that answers your question. The main thing is I use Time Machine only to back up my baseline computer stuff, not to back up Aperture. That's done with the Vault. The Vault works. I've tested it, tried to break it. It's very, very reliable and very easy, and you don't have to worry about where your stuff is. That's one of the big selling points to Aperture for me, and one of the reasons I've used it for more than 5 years now, since it came out. All right. Let's mention my friend SmugMug before we go on. SmugMug is a great place to both host and sell your photographs. SmugMug Pro is really good for that. If you are interested in having a website that you can sell from, or perhaps just being able to share your images, SmugMug is a great place to go. We have a banner on the homepage to take you to the SmugMug site, or just go to smugmug.com. Great group of people. They're all serious photographers who love photography. This isn't just some business they put together to make money. They really love photos. So check them out. We appreciate their support of Photofocus. Sean in Boston says, I'm about to buy the Nikon 70-200 f2.8. I see it at most retailers for roughly $2,000. But Nextag shows it at roughly $1,400 from another provider. It looks legit, but can I trust this? Any advice? Oh, Sean. Listen, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, and you've probably run into one of those resellers from Brooklyn. And by the way, years ago, somebody invited me to come down to Brooklyn to the address of some of these camera stores that you see advertised in a lot of the photo magazines. And we went walking around, and there ain't no photo store there. There's a green door, and a guy named Vinny says, well, I should get you a camera. And he goes into some room and comes back out with a box that might or might not have a camera in it. There's no retail outlet. A lot of these places, me personally, I'm not comfortable buying from them. I say stick with the big providers. Adorama is a sponsor. B&H is another company also you could trust. Sammy's Camera if you're on the West Coast. There are a lot of good camera stores. Deal locally if you can't deal with Adorama. They'll probably be the safest one to deal with because they'll have the camera right there. Now, I will give you a piece of advice about buying online. There's a place called resellerratings.com. Go there and see if the company through NextTag, because NextTag is just a list, it's a meta list of people that sell things, and you're going to click through to a link from an actual retailer. Put their name into the resellerratings.com website and see how they come up. I'm going to guess they do not come up looking very good. Let the buyer beware, all that kind of stuff. If it were me, I'd keep the $1,400 in my pocket and wait till I could buy it at a legitimate retailer. Good luck, Sean, and thanks for sending your question to photofocusatme.com. All right, we have another very long question. We usually don't take long questions, but Tom Shea in northern Maine sent us one we're going to read today. On a popular sharing website, they show a button on the bottom of every page that displays the photographer's photo called Embed. It contains the code to embed the photograph in another site. Actually, it's 500pics.com we're talking about. If you do so, it includes acknowledgement to the photographer. The Canadian copyright law, 500pics is based in Canada, says your photos may appear on iPad, iPhone, Android, and other apps. Ours and third party, but they will be bound by our terms of use and will be required to use proper attribution required by the Canadian law. Is this embed capability the bait of death? If Canada sees it as okay based on their terms of service, does that fly here in the States? I think asking a photographer about this is in order, and 500pics needs to state it. The question starts to get a little hard for me to understand, Tom. I think what you're saying is, is this something that applies to the U.S.? Yeah, if you're in the United States and you accept the terms of service in a Canadian company, then you're bound by what they do. I do not use 500pics. I gave them a try. I became concerned about some of the things they're doing, and those of you who follow me regularly know that I'm pretty stingy when it comes to posting my stuff online because in the most cases, I simply do not like the terms of service. I do not like the fact that my images could be embedded in somebody else's site and that they may use those images to, for instance, make a profit and I won't be compensated. And the fact that I get attribution means nothing to me. Nothing. Because I took attribution to 7-Eleven the other day and tried to buy a bottle of milk and they said, no way, bud, we want cash. Attribution does not pay the rent. Attribution does not pay the car payment. Attribution doesn't buy gas. Attribution doesn't get you squat. It's money I want for my pictures. I'm a pro, and if you are too, I would highly recommend that you carefully consider where you're going to put your images. And where are mine? They're over at SmugBug. Just saying. Yes, they're a sponsor, but that's where my stuff is. I've recently, this is from the Netherlands. Again, we've had a lot of questions from Europe today. I've recently experimented with a couple of Koken PND filters allow for longer exposures. The images, however, turn out darker with a gray cast on them. I would not expect that from a neutral density filter. So, am I doing something wrong? What should I do to get them right in the camera? Adjusting the white balance is a possibility I know of, but is there something else? Okay, here's the deal. Koken's filters are plastic. They're not optical grade filters. I've used them before. There are a couple things you need to know, though. If you take one of those filters and you lay it on a piece of white paper, you'll see it's not so neutral. It has a color cast. That's my problem with cheap plastic filters. You need optical glass. I use the Stingray Variable ND. It's very expensive, but it's optical glass. I use B plus W filters. Very expensive, but it's optical glass. They don't introduce color shift, and you get what you pay for, my friend, even in the Netherlands. So my opinion is that your problem starts with the fact that you're using plastic filters with a color cast. I will say that the grayness and the darkness that you're talking about can come by your meter being fooled by the filter, so make sure that you're allowing for the filter factor in your meter. Some meters are better than others at reading through the filters. Also, the proximity of the filter to the lens counts. Make sure that the filter's right up close to the lens. If you have it in some big fancy filter holder that's way far away from the lens, there's a chance for that to induce some problems. But most likely the problem is just cheap plastic filters. That's it. If you go buy a cheap plastic filter, then you got to be reminded of my grandfather's saying, if you buy a $10, if you have a $10 head head buy a $10 motorcycle helmet. You get what you pay for. So I think that's your problem. Thanks for the question, all the way from the Netherlands. Wow. We're living in tall cotton, being internationally beloved and all that kind of stuff. Let's take a question here from Jorge, who's in Madrid, Spain. Speaking of being internationally beloved, Jorge says, I was trying to make a self-portrait, but didn't know how to set up my focus. I have a cable release, but not long enough, and apparently with the self-timer, the focus will be fixed when I press the button and will not refocus, even in continuous autofocus or face recognition. How would you do it? My camera is a Panasonic GH2. Well, I would go to manual focus, my friend. I would put something in the spot where I was going to stand, focus on that via manual focus, then go use the self-timer, push the button, give yourself the 10 seconds to get back there, stand in the spot, and away you go. Now, a poor man's self-portrait can be made simply by standing in front of the mirror. That's another option. Just don't do it in front of the bathroom stall, because that kind of gives your location away. Just saying. But yeah, give that a try. I hope that helps you. Want to take just a second to give out thanks to Tenba. Tenba makes these cool messenger bags, and I've used, if you see me at any of the photo conventions, for years I've carried this big orange bag that sort of looks like a briefcase. That's a Tenba messenger bag, and inside it'll have a computer and cameras, and it's crazy how much stuff you can put in there. It's super padded. I had the guy knock mine out of a airline luggage storage bin once because he was mad that I got there before him, and it hit the floor, and my camera gear was just fine. Check these out. These messenger bags by Tenba are really cool. There's a banner on the Photofocus homepage you can click to take a look, and we appreciate their support of the show. Let's see. Question number 11. Herman Alexander from Jacksonville, Florida says, I noticed you talking about micro Four Thirds cameras lately. Do you think they're capable of delivering professional quality results? I absolutely positively do. At least the one I have experience with, Herman. I'm using the Olympus EP3, and I just finished leading a smug meeting, which is sort of like a meetup for smug mug people here in Vegas. And we had some professional models out at this place called the Dry Lake Bed. It's kind of like a Mojave Desert kind of location. And I used their lovely 45mm f1.8 lens, which gives you the effective focal length of 90mm. So it's like a 90mm 1.8 on this Olympus EP3. And I got creamy backgrounds with sharp foregrounds and lovely color rendition and tons of detail. I was shocked at how good it was. This camera is so small and lightweight that it's a whole lot easier to carry around than some of my big beefy DSLRs. And the results are pretty stunning. So, in fact, I'm telling you right now, I'll give you guys a hint that are listening to the show, and you ladies too, I'm leaning towards naming the Olympus EP3 as Camera of the Year. Unless something comes up between now and then to beat it that's actually shipping, that's our criteria, the camera has to be shipping, it may just make Camera of the Year this year, because I've got, I'm sitting here with an M9 right next to me, and I just was out here with the cheaper EP3 because it's just so easy to use. I shot with a Nikon D3S at the Indy 500, not the Indy 500, the IndyCar race last week here in Vegas. That beast was great for what I needed it for, but man, I was sure missing the EP3 because it's just light on my neck and way to go. So absolutely, Herman, you have no worries. If you buy at least the Olympus one, and there may be other Micro Four Thirds products that are equally good. I haven't tested them all, but I know about that one. You can indeed get professional images, but it is not going to be cheap. The reason to buy Micro Four Thirds is not to save money, because it's still going to be fairly spendy. I've got about $2,000 into my kit. The reason to buy it is it's small and lightweight and offers you some creative options you may not have with DSLRs, and you don't have to worry about mirror flap because there's no mirror. The depth of field stuff is kind of interesting because of the proximity of the lens to the sensor. There's a lot of stuff that make it an interesting format, but the two big things for me are weight and size, so give it a try. Yui Dong from Beijing, China. Oh my gosh, I don't think we've ever had a question from Beijing, so this may be a record in terms of international belovedness. The question is, I have a question about the frequency of color calibration. I did color calibration of my displays with a Spider or Color Monkey. I wonder if the software needs frequent recalibration. What is the cause of the recalibration? And how long, what's the best interval for a recalibration? Well, this completely depends, my friend, on the kind of monitor you have. If you have an old-fashioned CRT, a cathode ray tube, then you absolutely must do constant recalibration, even weekly, depending on how much you use the monitor, because every one of those pixels is just like us. The pixels are dying from the day they're born, and on a CRT, those little pixels are going to wear out one day. They're lighter and lighter and lighter every day, so constant recalibration is necessary. Now, if you have an LED monitor, once a year, just in case anything changes. LCDs, maybe once every 6 months. Frankly, I just sort of set them and forget them. Everyone tells me I should do it more often. I just can't find a reason logically to do it very often, so I don't. I set them and forget them, and I get real good color rendition, real good color management out of it. So it all depends on the kind of monitor that you have. That is the answer to the question from Beijing, China. Thank you very, very much for asking it and sending your question to photofocus@me.com. One more sponsor to mention really quickly, borrowlenses.com. Helped me out with the race last week, helping me. I'm shooting the NHRA Nationals pretty soon, SEMA, taking a trip to Italy. All kinds of stuff that I rely on from Borrow Lenses. Primarily what they do for me is send me backup gear, because I have all this gear, but I don't like to carry everything, so I'll sometimes have them send backup gear. They did for my Eagle trip. They sent me up a complete kit as backup, and I ended up needing a little bit of it, so that's always nice. But they have just about everything you could ever want in the way of camera gear, so you don't have to buy it. Particularly if you are interested in buying something, great to rent it from them first to see if it really performs the way you hope it does. Anyway, borrowlenses.com, great people to be associated with, and they're out there to help you if you want it, and I'm glad they support our show. Carlos from Puerto Rico. We've had Carlos on the show before. I've tried working with raw files, taking pictures of a white subject for a white reference during editing, but I still cannot get the whites as white. How do I assure white to be white? Well, that could be a function of color temperature, Carlos. This is somewhat related to a question from earlier in the show. You need to make sure that you're using the color temperature tool in whatever post-processing application you work with, in Aperture or Lightroom, Photoshop. There's a way to set the color temperature, the color balance. So I like to, for instance, in Aperture, when I'm working on an image, in the adjustments pane, there is a place right there that allows me to go in and select a little eyedropper. This eyedropper is something I would touch to something in the scene that's supposed to be white. And by doing that, Aperture automatically then adjusts all the color in the scene using that white point as its reference. And it takes a second. It's extremely reliable. There's no reason not to rely on it, because I've done it for more than 5 years with great results. And that seems to me to be one of the potential problems you're facing. That doesn't matter if you're working with RAW or JPEGs. If you don't get good color balance, if you're not using the right color temperature, then you're going to have trouble getting the whites white. Because remember, the whites are very reflective. They'll often reflect the sky, for instance, or any other prominent color around them, giving the impression that they are in fact not white. And that is why you want to use your white balance. Now, in addition to using white balance, by the way, in Aperture there's actually a command, it's called white balance, with that little eyedropper that'll give you the right color temperature. In addition to that, there are post-processing tools in the form of plugins and filters you can get to remove color cast. Nix software has one, for instance, as does I know that there are ways to do this in Lightroom and Photoshop, and Topaz has this. A lot of different third-party applications have it. So if you can't figure it out in camera, that may help you as well. Craig Hilton from Toronto, Canada writes in and says, this may be an old question, but is a Windows machine better or worse than a Mac machine from a photographer's perspective? Oh, Craig, don't do this to me. You realize what's going to happen now? I'm going to get death threats and hate mail because of this question, no matter how I answer it. So I'm just going to answer it the way I want to answer it. In the old days, there was no contest. The Macs were the preferred tool of the artists, the photographers, etc. The Macs were the first to get serious desktop publishing, fonts, the whole 9 yards. Lately, Windows has done quite a bit of catching up. The most recent copy of Windows that you can buy, I believe Windows 7, has done a lot better job, particularly managing profiles. That said, I have minutes of experience on a Windows machine because I'm a Mac guy. Always going to be a Mac guy. Never going to change because the Macs just work for me. I say there are two things that should help guide you when making this decision, Windows or Mac, for your photography stuff. One, what do the people around you use? If you've got 90 Windows users who are your best friends, get a Windows machine. They can help you, give you support. If you're the only Mac guy amongst 90 Windows users, they're just going to give you the blues and they're not going to help you. They're not going to be able to help you. So get what they get, and that way you'll have help. Vice versa, if you're around a bunch of Mac people, or you live close to a Mac store where you can get free help, get a Mac. One advantage of a Mac is it will now run the Windows operating system. That's easy to do, so you can run both, whereas you can't run the Mac operating system on a Windows machine. So I say get a Mac. It's just easier to use in general. The whole computer is biased towards people that do things like Photoshop, and then if you want to run Windows on it, you can. So I hope that helps. And by the way, the prices, if you really compare apples to apples, the Macs aren't that much more expensive, if at all. Now, there are sure people who will come up and make comparisons and can gin up something that makes it look like the Mac is dramatically more expensive. But when you get down to pound for pound, feature for feature, they're comparable. So if money's a problem, you can save a couple of bucks on a Windows machine, but not much. And you certainly will save time, in my experience, on a Mac. And you can run the Windows operating system on the Mac too. So there you go. I think we have time for one more question. That's from Anna Michaels in San Francisco, California. Kind of controversial question. Lots of controversial questions. She said, I noticed that there are more male speakers and teachers in the photo world than female speakers and teachers. Am I reading something into this that's not there by wondering if sexism at play? Well, Anna, I can't speak for anybody but myself, but I've invited lots of women to speak at conferences where I play a role in picking the speakers. And I don't think about the speakers from the perspective of whether or not they're male or female. I think about them from the perspective, are they good photographers and are they good teachers? That's all I care about. I do know that our industry has generally been more male dominated, but I am happy to say that if you go to conventions like WPPI coming here to Vegas, where I live, in February, you'll see about half and half these days. In the portrait and wedding world, the audiences are about 50-50 men and women, so females are starting to make their mark. Now, whether or not there are that many great female teachers, well, I can name a bunch that I've seen. I've seen Jules and Joy Bianchi. I've seen, Tamara Lackey. I've seen, a whole bunch. Bottom line is, I think that there probably is more male dominance in this field because there are more men. I don't believe anybody's actually trying to be sexist. At least I've never heard of that kind of talk. I don't know. I mean, I'd be interested to talk to somebody like Tamara Lackey or Lori Nordstrom, some of the female speakers that are regularly out on the tour, and see what they think. Maybe they've experienced something I don't know about, but I think the best way to combat that is make sure lots of women get involved in photography at every level, and that'll be the simplest way to make sure there are lots of women teachers and lecturers, because most people that run these conferences have to make some kind of profit to keep it alive, or at least break even. And if there are big demands for female teachers that aren't met, people won't come to the conferences. So I believe that will trump any desire, for instance, to be sexist. But I hope there isn't any. If there is, let me know and I'll try to do something about it. Okay. Well, hey, we're here the 5th, the 15th, and the 25th of every month. You can follow me on Twitter at Scott Bourne. If you just want to find the Photofocus updates on Twitter, just follow Photofocus on Twitter. If you follow Scott Bourne, all one word, then you'll get Photofocus updates and everything else I write about, but it's still almost all photography. Occasionally I sneak in a thing about one of my cars, but that's it. And we appreciate you being here. We appreciate all the sponsors. I promise to try again to get a co-host next time for the show. Like I said, we had Matt all lined up. Maybe we'll still be able to get him. Maybe his hard disk will be fixed by then. Until then, I still hope that what you heard here was valuable to you. And I want to send you out with my usual admonition. Go out there and make pictures. Don't just take pictures. We'll see you on the next Photofocus.